I will work day in and day out.
Wake up and smell the coffee.
Today is the beginning of a new chapter.
Another future's possible, but we've got to fight for it.
Order!
Hello and welcome to the Debated podcast. As always, I'm your host, Will, and in this episode, I'm delighted to be joined. Once again, it's been a while since he's been on the podcast. Sean Woodcock, the newly elected Labour MP for Banbury. Welcome to the podcast, Sean.
Thanks for having me on, Will.
It's great to have you on. And the first question that I'd like to ask is, obviously the last time you were on the podcast was before Keir Starmer was elected leader of the Labour Party. We're going back to I think 2020. And the Labour Party has changed quite a bit in that time, hasn't it? How important do you think that change has been to the success that you've seen in Banbury and other Labour candidates have seen across the country in the recent general election?
It's absolutely vital, Will. There's no doubt, without changing the Labour Party in the manner that he has, that Keir Starmer would not have won that majority. We were elected as a changed Labour Party, and we need to govern as that. It's fair, having had a result as bad as we did in 2019, the worst for I think 80 years. We had to change. We had to reflect and look at why we were rejected so roundly by the British public, and I think we've done that. It's not always necessarily been as smooth as we would have liked it, but clearly, as the election last week shows, the public have responded to the fact that we are more open. We're taking on board their concerns and focused on the things that matter to them, rather than talking to ourselves, and that led to the result that we had last week.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And as you mentioned, the election, of course, was only a week ago. We've seen, quite a whirlwind of activity from the new government. But just to go back to the campaign for a moment, how did you find this campaign? Did you find it one that was, dealt with well by your opponents? Do you think it was a good campaign from a local perspective?
Well, I don't want to talk so much about my opponents as about ourselves. Keir Starmer, as I said, has changed the Labour Party fundamentally to make sure that we are in the service of the British people and responding to the things that matter to them. So we took that locally, making sure that we are listening to the concerns of the people in the Banbury constituency. So for them, that is issues, the cost of living, which continued to come up on the doorstep and still does, the lack of affordable housing for people, potholes on the roads, but most importantly, the NHS and the crisis in the NHS. I mean, locally, we've got the Horton General Hospital in Banbury, which has been downgraded under the Conservatives, but wider than that, the inability of people to get seen by a GP or a dentist came up a lot on the doorstep, and it became symptomatic for people, I think, of a government that was a Conservative government that was no longer functioning and that was no longer delivering for the British people. So that was the key campaign that I pushed, and focusing on those priorities of tackling the cost of living, sorting out the housing crisis, and as I said, first and foremost, tackling the NHS and fixing the NHS, and people responded positively to that on the doorstep.
Mm-hmm, absolutely, and of course you mentioned a lot of those issues, and those issues are addressed in the Labour Party's manifesto, and it's a very detailed and comprehensive manifesto. What are you most looking forward to seeing from that manifesto being enacted? Is there anything that you think will particularly resonate from the manifesto when it's enacted to your constituents?
Well, I'm pleased with the action we've taken so far in the first week. So, scrapping the Rwanda gimmick, the moves that Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, announced on planning, making sure that we can actually get wind turbines built, regardless of whether there's a single objector, which was the ridiculous situation we had before, and getting the houses built that we need. It's absolutely a priority for me to get the houses that we need built, and the failure of the Conservatives on the housing crisis is something that really has a bigger impact than possibly people think, and that a lot of voters recognise in where they may have their own. They may be relatively well off, be comfortable in their own housing, but they see their children, their grandchildren struggling to get on the property ladder. They see temporary accommodation, people in temporary accommodation, and the number of people in temporary accommodation going up. They see increasing number of rough sleepers on the streets. So I'm excited that this is a Labour government that is focused on tackling that issue.
Absolutely, and of course the recent announcement by the Environment Secretary Steve Reed in relation to water pollution. I think that that's something that is obviously going to have a massive impact, and certainly something that will help the waterways in Banbury and in your constituency, won't it?
Absolutely. I mean, at one of the hustings that I attended, a question was asked of the candidates: when will I be able to dip in the river Evenlode, which is run through Charbury, part of my constituency, again, without fearing that I'll get sick. I mean, the fact that someone is even asking that question at hustings shows the state of the waterways, and the despair that people felt that again, they see potholes in the roads, they see an NHS that hasn't been working, they see police not attending when a crime is committed, and they see filth in the rivers and sewage in our seas, and it just showed that this was that Britain was not working properly, and that's why we need the decade of national renewal that Keir Starmer's promised.
Absolutely, and you mentioned there the recent announcements that Rachel Reeves has made relating to house building and to planning reform. How much of an impact do you think that that's going to make on your constituents in terms of not just the availability of housing, but also the actual cost people may pay, whether in renting or in mortgage payments if they're trying to buy a home?
It absolutely will make a massive impact. The lack of supply is a key driver behind the housing crisis. We've not built enough homes over the last 14 years, and we need to get more built. That means the planning reforms are necessary. There's other things that we need to do on housing as well, and that's why I'm very happy at what Angela Rayner is pushing through in terms of tenants' rights and ending no-fault evictions, which has had a massive impact on the number of people presenting to the local authority, saying that they're in housing need because they're facing a so-called no-fault eviction. But the fact that we are planning to build more homes will go a long way to tackling a lot of the issues that there are in the housing market.
And on that issue, you mentioned no-fault evictions. Of course, the Conservatives had promised to abolish no-fault evictions, hadn't they, in 2019, and had attempted to get a bill passed through the past Parliament to abolish them. Do you think that the urgency that's been shown by Angela Rayner on this issue and the clear determination, in contrast to the Conservatives, demonstrates to the public the scale of change that has already happened in terms of the way that the government responds to some of the really most important concerns that many voters have?
Absolutely, and what I know as well is that there were Conservative councillors who were frustrated at the failure of the Conservative government to fulfil that promise on ending no-fault evictions. The council that I sit on, Sherwood District Council, and that I was, until my recent election to Parliament, lead a Labour group on, passed motions criticising and calling on the government to make good that promise, because the Conservative councillors who, until this May, ran that authority, could see the impact it was having on the number of people presenting as homeless. So I think there was a frustration from even Conservative councillors that it was a promise that was undelivered, along with several others that the Boris Johnson made in 2019 that ended up not being fulfilled, which is another thing that we noticed on the doorstep. People were really, really cynical, and in many ways rightly, when people went knocking on the door about the election and talking about the things that we want to do, because they feel that they've been lied to before, and feel that people come and promise things and then don't deliver, which is why I was pleased that we were putting forward things that are credible, measurable, and that we can deliver. There had been an argument that we weren't ambitious enough, but I disagree, in the sense that the cynicism that we were faced with meant that we had to present things that we know we can deliver in order to try and erase some of that cynicism and get people believing that politics can be a force for good again.
Absolutely. And on the issue of the relationship with local government, obviously, Keir Starmer very recently met with elected mayors from across the United Kingdom, some who hadn't even had the chance to meet the former Prime Minister. What do you think that says about the new government's relationship with mayors and other forms of local representation? And how important do you think the relationship will be going forward in terms of not just maintaining trust with parts of the country that may have felt neglected, but also in ensuring that decisions on like a local level will be made in a way that people feel represents them, and that they're having a relationship with a mayor that, that mayor is then going to be listened to by the Prime Minister.
Keir Starmer said that he wanted to reset the relationship with the leaders of the devolved nations and with the regional mayors, and I think this was the first step to doing that, because every part of the United Kingdom has a really important role to play in the decade of national renewal that he's promised, and so I was pleased that happened within the first week of him taking office.
On the economy, this is obviously, as mentioned, as a core part of the decade of national renewal. How important do you think the first budget is going to be? Obviously, we don't know when that budget will be. It will be sometime in the forthcoming months, and we don't know exactly what's going to be in it. But how important do you think that will be in terms of setting the standard of what people can expect in terms of economic policy from this Labour government?
What's important in budgets is the stability, and that people understand, whether they're in business or whether they're just whether they're a normal citizen, whoever they are, whatever role they play, that they understand what it's going to be like for the foreseeable future, so they can plan accordingly. That's what we promised on taking office, that we would bring stability back to the economy and to the country and the government of the country, and that's what I am confident that we'll be doing with any budget going forward.
Absolutely. Just thinking about, Keir Starmer has obviously gone to meet other NATO leaders, and Britain's stance on the world stage has obviously, to many people's eyes, taken a hit over the past few years because of the way that other countries perceived the Conservative government and our previous Conservative prime ministers. How important do you think it is that there is a sense of a reset, not just domestically, but also internationally, in terms of the way that Britain is viewed around the world? And do you think that that's going to have a positive effect on, any future trade deals or any future economic cooperation with other countries?
Absolutely, a reset is really important. There's lots of things that we need to work with international partners on if we want to fix them, not least climate change, but also migration, international terrorism, the threats to security that we face. So it's important that we have a world leader who is trusted on the world stage and who is going out there with the right intentions and is seen as going out there with the right intentions. And I'm absolutely certain that that's what we've got now, and that's seen by world leaders. And we saw this week, Joe Biden and Keir Starmer, getting on royally. So I think the world leaders will be more than happy at the start that the Labour Party has made in government.
Absolutely. What do you think the most important thing is that you're going to hope to achieve over your term as a member of parliament? Do you have something that's right at the top of your agenda that you hope that you'll be able to achieve through the course of this Parliament?
Well, the party nationally has rightly prioritised growth as the way out of as the most important mission that we need to tackle. So we need to grow the economy if we want to be able to do a lot of the things that we want to do in terms of public services. And I agree with that. As for me personally, my 5 priorities are the same that they were in the election. So it's, as I said, the cost of living, looking after local NHS services, including the Horton General Hospital, bringing good jobs to Banbury, and protecting businesses and farmers, and dealing with the housing crisis. Those are my priorities. They were my priorities before the election. They're the ones that I'll be judged on.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for taking the time to speak to me, Sean. It's been great to hear from you, and good luck in settling in as a new member of Parliament. If there's anybody listening who wants to find out more about you, or if they're a constituent potentially want to get in touch, where should they go to find out more about the work you're going to be doing as an MP, and potentially, as I say, to get in touch?
You can find me on Twitter, or X as it is now, or at Sean L. Woodcock.
Terrific. Thank you once again for coming on the podcast.
Pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. If you've enjoyed it, you can subscribe to us on iTunes, Spotify, Podbeam, and Amazon Music. You can also follow us on Twitter, @DebatedPodcast, like us on Facebook, Debated Podcast, and if you'd like to get in touch with us, whether about appearing on an episode of the podcast or commenting on an episode that you've listened to, you can do so at thedebatedpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for listening. I hope you listen to the next one.